I quit caffeine to improve my bodybuilding training, and this is what you need to know. Was it worth it? Would I do it again? What would my advice be if you are going to try and come off of it? And also, why would I come off of caffeine as a way to improve bodybuilding? I mean, it sounds strange because we've all seen the big, huge ass bodybuilders, way bigger than me, pounding back monsters day after day. So, why would caffeine be a negative? Or why would you ever think about coming off of caffeine? So the reason that I came off of caffeine was to try and resensitize, because there are some ergogenic effects to caffeine. These are that it can improve your performance, it can decrease your rate of perceived exertion, it can increase the amount of volume that you can take, your volume capacity, and basically all of these things just mean that everything you do in the gym feels a bit easier. You can do another rep whilst it's still feeling like 3 reps in reserve. You can do an extra set without feeling exhausted. You might be able to give more energy and more effort in those sets because you're just more alert. But the problem is that you build up a tolerance to caffeine, and over time you're going to need more and more and more to get these same ergogenic effects, because you build up that tolerance. So the whole reasoning behind me coming off of caffeine is to try and resensitize myself to those benefits so that I can experience the effects of caffeine while taking much less. Previously, I was around about 400 to 500 milligrams of caffeine a day, which by no means is crazy, but it's a fair amount. That's like a pre-workout and 3 coffees. That was my day to day. And I wanted to get that down mainly as an experiment to see if I could get the same feeling from like 1 cup of coffee or not having pre-workout or half a pre-workout. Pre-workout's expensive. I'd save some money if I didn't need it every day. And then when it comes to the time that I chose to come off, every 5 weeks of hard training, I have 1 week of deload training. So to me, when my training is going to get substantially easier, it makes sense to drop the caffeine. So I was deloading for a week. I decided to do a caffeine deload as well. So yes, my plan to come off of caffeine was not a prolonged period of time. It was 100% a temporary period of coming off of caffeine as an experiment to see what happens. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience actually coming off of caffeine. And the main thing I want to let you know is that I didn't just stop cold turkey, I tapered down my caffeine because I wanted to try and minimize the negative side effects, the consequences of reducing that caffeine intake. The thought process is if I go from 500 on a Saturday to 0 milligrams on a Monday, I'm probably going to feel pretty crap. But if I go 500, 400, 300, 200, 100, then ease myself into 0, I might feel a little bit better. Did it work? I don't know man, I still felt pretty crap. I am not joking, I am not lying to you when I say that I had headaches bordering on migraines for 6 days. It took 6 days for my caffeine withdrawal headaches to stop. I was expecting headaches for maybe 2-3 days. 6 days of withdrawal headaches. It killed me. And also another one which is really weird. I was pissing all the time. I went to the toilet probably 3 times more than normal. Why? I don't know. It doesn't even make sense because caffeine's a diuretic. With less caffeine, I should have been urinating less, but it's like 3 times more. What was going on? Another very strange one is that my sleep got worse. Everyone talks about how the best thing you can do for your sleep is to stop having caffeine and it's going to make you sleep like a dream, and the fact you have 1 coffee at 5 a.m. in the morning is destroying your sleep at 10 p.m. I don't know man, I stopped 3 coffees and a pre-workout and I've pretty much had the worst week of sleep of my life. Maybe it was the pounding headache I had from the withdrawal, but it certainly didn't help my sleep, let's put it that way. Another side effect, another consequence of dropping the caffeine was that I experienced some major brain fog. You know that feeling when in the morning you wake up and you're all like groggy and you're looking around a bit like this, and then about halfway through your first cup of coffee for the day, you feel that grogginess like lift, like clouds have just dissipated from your mind. Yeah, that doesn't happen when you don't have caffeine, and it progressively got worse as I tapered down. But I was quite surprised to see that I still had brain fog just at like 200 milligrams of caffeine still. I thought it would take 0 caffeine to not have any brain fog, but yeah. Caffeine is strong stuff, guys. Seriously, don't underestimate it. Obviously, just general fatigue. Before, when you're feeling tired, what do? You have a coffee, you feel better. When you don't have that, you don't feel better. And also, I'm pretty sure it's amplified because in the back of your head, you're always thinking the whole day, I'd be having a coffee about now. I'd be having a pre-workout about now. And all these things. And because you know you're not having the caffeine, which is supposed to be giving you energy, you feel that you have less energy. It's like it's a nocebo, do they call it? Placebo? I don't know, it's a something bow. And then the last thing was I had some major coffee cravings. If somebody walked in with like a Costa into my gym and you just smell the aromatic coffee, the hankerings for coffee. And obviously caffeine and coffee are different. I was off of caffeine, but in your head you correlate coffee to caffeine, so I was getting those, it's like that, it's that addiction. I was getting cravings for it, and those cravings lasted pretty much all the way until Monday morning when I reintroduced caffeine. And what happened when I reintroduced caffeine? Well, my expectations were super high. I thought that after a week tapering and then completely coming off of caffeine for multiple days, that first cup of coffee on a Monday morning would give me this huge rush and I'd feel amazing. I was expecting to feel a little bit like a superhero after one cup of coffee, and usually I'm quite skeptical about these sort of things. I'm very level-headed. It takes a lot to build my expectations. So I don't know why I built this up so much in my head, but I was just expecting huge things from coming off and then reintroducing caffeine. I thought I was going to be Superman. I thought that first pre-workout that I had would literally blow my head off and that I'd be hitting PRs. Again, why did I think this when I'm usually quite skeptical? I don't know. I essentially thought that less coffee would give me more of an effect than I was having from more of it before. But the reality was, there was very little difference, if anything at all. I started with much less caffeine than I was having before, probably about 150 milligrams per day, and I very quickly ended right back up at that 400 to 500 milligram mark. And when I was having 150 a day, I didn't really feel much. When I was at that 450 mark, I felt the same as when I was having it before tapering off of caffeine. It didn't feel like I was massively resensitized. I didn't feel a lot. So considering all of those negative side effects I told you about, and considering that when I reintroduced it, it wasn't that mind-blowing experience I was expecting, was it worth it? For me, absolutely not. There was no noticeable effects of resensitization through coming off of caffeine for that week. And even if I had have felt quite a big difference in resensitization, that difference would only be temporary. It would only be until I built my tolerance back up, and considering how bad of a withdrawal symptoms that I personally had from it, it would not be worth it for something that is very temporary. Of course, on this matter, I can only speak for myself. You might have a completely different experience with this, especially if you were coming from a way higher caffeine intake. I was at 400 to 500 milligrams, which isn't absurd, but there are some people out there getting 800, 900 a gram. If you are right up at that gram mark, then I probably would recommend slowly tapering down, and then maybe only letting yourself get back up to 500 or 600 and living there, because a gram probably isn't healthy. But yes, you need to experience this yourself to make up your own mind on it. Don't just go off of my experience, even though my experience really is nothing to shout about. But like I say, for me personally, when I was at that 400 to 500 milligram mark, I really felt no negatives to the amount of caffeine I was having. I wasn't getting crashes of energy. I wasn't getting those like grumpy dips that some people talk about. It wasn't stressful. It was fine. The only bad effects I felt when I stopped taking it, which, yeah, it's obviously not a good thing, but it's easy to get caffeine day to day, so why would I try and get myself off of it? So, unfortunately, I really can't see any reason to do it again. And I say unfortunately because I wanted this to be a mind-blowing experience. It just wasn't. So when I tapered off caffeine, I learned quite a bit. It was my first time doing it and I didn't really have any advice going into this. So now I want to give you my tips and my advice for if you do want to try this yourself, if my own experience hasn't completely put you off of it. And the first thing I'm going to say is do not go off cold turkey. There has been some research showing that to fully resensitize to caffeine, you actually don't need to completely drop caffeine. You can still resensitize on caffeine by just having a very low dose, like 1 cup of coffee a day, especially if you were previously on a high intake, like that gram mark. But I still think to be safe and to give yourself the best chances of getting a strong resensitization effect, I do think you should completely go off. But don't go off cold turkey because, like I said, we've seen it isn't necessary. So it could look like 3 coffees and a pre-workout one day, 2 coffees and a pre-workout the next day. The day after that could be 2 coffees again, but half a pre-workout. Then it could be 2 coffees and no pre-workout, then 1 coffee. Then you might have no caffeine at all for a few days, 4, 3, 5 days, and then slowly reintroduce it. The next bit of advice I would give you is to set your expectations low. I am not joking when I said that I went into this with crazy high expectations. I literally thought I was going to feel like a superhero. I know it's stupid, I should know better by now, but we all make these mistakes. But if you set your expectations to pretty much nothing, then you can't be disappointed. At best, you will be happy with the results and you will be pleased and not feel like you've wasted your time. So set your expectations low. Tip number 3 is going to be to replace fluids so that you don't become dehydrated. Like I said, I was pissing like mad and I don't know why. This might be just a me thing because it doesn't make sense given that caffeine's a diuretic. I should have been urinating less, but just in case it isn't just me and it happens to other people as well, make sure you're replacing those lost fluids, because if you are getting yourself in a state of mild dehydration along with the caffeine withdrawals, you're going to feel even worse. Being mildly dehydrated gives you very similar side effects to coming off of caffeine. That brain fog, the dizziness, the lightheadedness, mainly the headaches, they're all pretty similar, so all you're going to be doing is amplifying those effects if you aren't rehydrating. The next tip is to use caffeine-free drinks and decaf coffee so that you don't go insane. Please don't feel that you can't enjoy the drinks that you normally enjoy just because you are deciding to taper off of caffeine. Yes, some people drink coffee purely for the caffeine kick, but some people, like myself, absolutely love the taste of coffee. I drink it because I love the taste, not necessarily for the caffeine in it. And decaf gets a bad rap, but trust me, if you've not had decaf for a few years, it's gotten better. They've gotten better making it. And yes, it may not be 100% the same. It might not be as good as normal coffee, but if it's between nothing and decaf, I'm taking the decaf. Along with that, you can get a bunch of 0 caffeine fizzy drinks these days. You've got 7-Up free, you can get caffeine-free Coke and Pepsi. There's loads of options out there. You just need to have a look, especially if you live in America, because you guys get all the cool drinks. It's so annoying. And my last tip for you is to taper your caffeine intake back up when you do reintroduce it, if you decide to reintroduce it. Just because I personally didn't get a big resensitization effect and I could have gone straight back up to the 400-500 milligrams mark, it doesn't mean that you won't get a huge resensitization effect. Everyone is different. For you, if you go from 0 back to 500 milligrams, your head might explode. So take it steady and reintroduce it slowly. If you just jump straight back to your previous intake, then it'll probably be way too much for you to tolerate. And it also just defeats the purpose of actually resensitizing yourself in the first place. The whole point is that you'll need to have less when you start back up again. So why would you go back to normal? The goal should be to slowly reintroduce caffeine so that on week 1 of your training, in week 1 of the meso, you don't need much caffeine. Your caffeine slowly builds as your training intensity builds over the mesocycle. Your caffeine intake will peak right around your peak week of training, which is your overreaching week where everything is taken to failure. You then deload from training, deload from caffeine again, and you repeat that cycle. That's a theory. It didn't work for me, but it might work for you. So if you think it could be something that could benefit you, especially if you are on a very, very high caffeine intake at the moment, then give it a try. But like we discussed, for me, no benefits, not worth it, big headaches, no thanks.